The original Back to the Future films released from 1985 through 1990 mainly depicted Marty McFly portrayed by Michael J. Fox and Dr. Emmett Brown portrayed by Christopher Lloyd. However, the main villain of the film trilogy was Biff Tannen portrayed by Thomas Wilson. Due in part to the acting of Thomas Wilson, Biff Tannen became one of the most iconic villains in cinema from the United States throughout the late 1980s and into the early 1990s. The premise that an ordinary individual who were given the chance could redo events that they had done previously in their life to change their present or even alter their potential future was one of the most notable details about why Biff bothered to change the future in the films, and was the very concept for why Marty and the Doc had to repeatedly change history and move throughout different timelines according to the continuity of the original films. In particular, Biff's in-depth details about the almanac were of discussions, and debates even, as to how realistic Biff's scenario was, in terms of bringing back a piece of information from the future to use in the past for financial gain for decades. Due to the months, dates, and years depicted in the films, there were fond speculations and theories surrounding the movies due to the then 2016 presidential campaign of Donald Trump, and there were various discussions across the internet about it. The 21st of October 2015 was called Back to the Future Day, as the months and weeks leading up to the particular event had plenty of articles which corresponded to the events depicted in the film. Interviews of the time had screenwriter Bob Gale modeling Biff Tannen on Donald Trump. This was proven to be later false, with the original details having the character of Biff Tannen inspired by a studio executive. The entire premise of Biff Tannen based on Donald Trump wasn't possible because in 1985 the actions of Donald Trump weren't like what was later depicted in 2015, as at the time sources had Donald Trump being a minor real estate developer from New York City, not even known throughout the United States nationally. The Apprentice in the United States was first broadcasted in 2004, and this was when Donald Trump was first exposed to the entirety of the United States. So the claim that Biff Tannen as a character was inspired by Donald Trump was a lie, even with the details of Biff Tannen's character in terms of relations to Donald Trump were false. Yet other correlations were made between Biff Tannen's illicit gains through the almanac for his fortune and Donald Trump's inherited fortune were there. Biff Tannen infiltrating the Republican Party and transforming it into what he desired it to be. Donald Trump infiltrating the Republican Party and transforming it into what he desired it to be. Biff Tannen was ultimately stopped. Donald Trump was ultimately stopped, but in both cases not before damage was done to the United States as a country. Biff Tannen was one of the first modern examples of a selfish and uncaring individual who, through circumstances greater than himself, had him as an insignificant individual that later affected an entire country and destroyed entire lives in the process. Thomas Wilson later commented that his role as Biff Tannen was the most iconic of his career, as for years and even decades after the film's releases, he received praise for what he had done, but there were also consequences in the fact that fans would often ask him repeatedly the same questions relating to the film, and he later carried index cards to either read to fans or to give fans about the conditions or circumstances that he had for the film. Biff Tannen is a character that you should know about because the conditions for him could easily become fact and not fiction.